I love Star Wars. I can still remember the first time I encountered the franchise as a kid, and I was immediately intrigued. It was 1997, I was 8 years old, and while I was vaguely aware of the Star Wars franchise at the time, I was finally sat down and properly introduced to it, and I loved it. However, my complete infatuation with the franchise began in earnest when I read a little book called The Heir to the Empire. Heir to the Empire was the unofficial launch of the expanded universe, a group of hundreds of books, comics, and games that told the continuing story of our heroes beyond the end of the Return of the Jedi. I love the expanded universe and have spent a large majority of my life collecting and reading the books of this series. So you can imagine my heartbreak when Disney purchased Lucasfilm in 2012 and completely flushed the expanded universe down the drain. I believe this was one of the biggest mistakes Disney has made in their handling of Star Wars, because the expanded universe was a treasure trove of ready-made stories to pull from that far surpassed anything Disney Star Wars has produced in the last 11 years. Now, this is not a video on how bad Disney Star Wars is. Those videos exist elsewhere, and I highly recommend some of them. I'll probably get around to delivering my own thoughts on Disney Star Wars at some point, but this video is about something else. This video is about how important the expanded universe is to Star Wars, and why so many Star Wars fans felt betrayed by Disney's decision to cancel it. It is my proposition that Star Wars would not exist without the expanded universe. Okay, obviously that is a bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. Follow me here. Star Wars, later titled A New Hope, debuted in 1977. This little independent B-movie from a rogue director took the world by storm, as moviegoers saw the movie 3, 4, 5 times while in its initial run. 1980 saw the release of The Empire Strikes Back to even more fanfare. The Empire Strikes Back set the standard for film and is, in my opinion, a perfect movie. Not the perfect movie, for no definitive perfect movie exists, but a perfect movie. In 1983, Return of the Jedi debuted to similar fanfare, and while not as good as Empire, is 2/3 of a great movie with an interesting heist story tacked on to the beginning. My point is not to rehash the original Star Wars trilogy. My point is that post-Return of the Jedi, Star Wars was essentially done. There were a few cartoons, some comics here and there, and a few games, but by and large Star Wars was a dead franchise, well remembered and beloved, but dead nonetheless. That is, until the 1991 release of Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. In hindsight, the release of Heir to the Empire and its sequels isn't that revolutionary of an idea. Continuing the storyline of a very popular IP seems like a no-brainer, but Heir to the Empire took the world by storm, reaching #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The trilogy as a whole sold over 15 million copies and helped expand Lucasfilm's non-film media into mainstream consciousness like never before. And, like most new things that became popular and profitable, the floodgates opened. At the same time as the release of the Thrawn trilogy, a graphic novel series by Tom Veitch and Cam Kennedy called Dark Empire was released, providing a look at a reborn emperor and his impact on a rebuilding galaxy. Shortly afterward, The Truce at Bakura was released, detailing the days immediately following the destruction of the second Death Star, followed by the Jedi Academy trilogy, chronicling Luke Skywalker's re-establishment of the Jedi Order. Then the massive Shadows of the Empire multimedia campaign came out in 1996, followed by the X-Wing series of books by Michael A. Stackpole, filling in some of the gap between Truce and the Thrawn trilogy. Between 1991 and 1997, over 30 mainline Star Wars novels were released, along with countless other books and comics. Suddenly, Star Wars was back in the public mindset like no other time since 1983. Around this time, George Lucas had to be sitting around counting all of his money and probably had an idea. Say, Star Wars is still popular. I bet I could make that prequel story I've been talking about on and off for the last 15 years. In 1999, he did just that. The Phantom Menace was released in one of the most anticipated cinematic events in the history of film. And while not as well received as many would have hoped, it still reignited Star Wars fever around the world. The Phantom Menace was followed by its sequels, all to great fanfare, and the expanded universe suddenly had a whole new playground in which to play. The expansion of the prequel era, along with the continuing post-Jedi world of the new Jedi Order, meant that Star Wars still had plenty of stories to tell. However, what would have happened if Heir to the Empire had never been written? It's not outside the realm of possibility that Star Wars remains as that beloved dead franchise from the 70s and 80s. But no, the expanded universe kept Star Wars relevant long enough for George Lucas to realize that there was still profitability to be had from the property. And it was this reinvigoration of the franchise that made Disney view it, along with the rest of Lucasfilm, as being worth $4 billion. Disney owes a lot of the value of Star Wars to the expanded universe and its fans, which is why it was such a betrayal to them to get rid of and abandon these promised storylines. What do I mean by this? Near the end of the expanded universe run, there were two concurrent storylines transpiring at the same time. The Legacy of the Force and the Fate of the Jedi novel series, taking place between 40 and 44 years after the Battle of Yavin, and the Legacy comic series, taking place 100 years later. As these two series unfolded, a number of seeds were planted in the former that resulted in possible outcomes in the latter, but the path of events was not clear. Lucasfilm made promises to expanded universe fans about how these events would unfold over the next few properties, but all these plans and promises were jettisoned with Disney's purchase in 2012. I believe this was a betrayal of the fan base, what would turn out to be the first of many such betrayals over the next decade plus. It set Disney's plans for a new canon at a disadvantage from the very beginning, as they decided to chart their own course apart from the already established expanded universe storyline. The problem with this decision is twofold. First, it was a slap in the face to a significant portion of the most dedicated Star Wars fans, telling the core fan base that all their years of loyalty and financial support had been essentially wasted. There would be no completion of the story, there would be no resolution, there would be no respect given to the people that kept Star Wars alive during the dark times between trilogies. Second, by getting rid of the pre-established stories, it forced Disney to use untalented storytellers who were more focused on intersectionality and crushing the patriarchy than on respecting the established lore and its fans. That is why the expanded universe continues to be important. It stands as a constant reminder of what Disney chose to leave behind in favor of what they chose to create. That's not to say that all the expanded universe is excellent. It does have its duds. Most of the prequel era stuff is subpar, not all but most. The Crystal Star, Children of the Jedi, Planet of Twilight, and the Corellian trilogy all lagged in quality compared to the rest of the expanded universe. With all that said, the X-Wing series, the Thrawn trilogy, and the New Jedi Order are all far superior to anything Disney has produced. The expanded universe is important because it is a reminder that good storytelling does exist and is possible when people actually care about the property and its characters. I recommend diving into the expanded universe if you haven't done so already. Not every story is perfect, but even the worst of the EU has a kernel of love for Star Wars within it. That by itself is superior to Disney Star Wars. We as Star Wars fans need to demand better stories, and the expanded universe is a great place to start. Thank you for watching, and happy reading.